The question, if God created man, who created God? This is one of the most popular arguments used by atheists to argue against the existence of a creator, and it's even been made into a popular song by one of my favorite bands. The problem with this argument is that it's based on a false premise. The premise is that if everything has a cause, then God must also have a cause for his existence. But what if we were to tell atheists what they actually believe in their own doctrines, what they hold to be true? What would their response be? Let's find out. Welcome back to another episode. As always, I want to thank you all so much for joining me here at the channel. Our channel exists to help people understand the Christian worldview and to defend that worldview against the attacks of those who oppose it. So if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Now, if you're familiar with the channel, you know that we often deal with difficult questions that people have about Christianity. Questions like, does God really exist? How do we know that the Bible is true? Does science disprove the Bible? And we tackle these questions and many others in our podcast called The Briefing Room. We've had a lot of success with that, but recently we decided to take things to the next level. We've launched a second podcast called The G3 Guys. It's a bit more informal. It's a bit more fun, but we still deal with those tough questions, and we answer them through the lens of our Christian faith. In fact, we just did an episode on the question, if God created the world, who created God? You can listen to that episode now on various platforms. Now, there are a number of ways that you can respond to the question, if God created the world, who created God? For example, you could say that it simply means that there was always a God. In other words, God was always there. He had no beginning. He just always was. In fact, that's what the Bible teaches in the book of Genesis, where it says in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now notice that it doesn't say that God created the heavens and the earth, and that before that, there was nothing. That's not what it says. It simply says that God created the heavens and the earth. And that's the end of the story. The point is that there was never a time when God wasn't there. There was never a time when the earth wasn't there. They simply always were. You could also respond to the atheist's question by pointing out that their argument commits the same sort of fallacy that they are accusing Christians of committing. In other words, their argument isn't valid. Let me explain. Atheists will often accuse Christians of circular reasoning when it comes to arguments about God's existence. They'll say that the argument goes like this. God created the world because we observe that the world is ordered, and we see all this order and complexity and design in nature and in the universe, therefore, there must be a designer. But that designer is God. And the Bible says that God created the world. So the conclusion of the argument is simply the premise of the argument. They're essentially saying, you can't argue that God created the world just because you believe in God. But what they fail to realize is that they are doing the exact same thing. Their argument for the non-existence of God goes like this. God created the world, but everything must have a cause. Therefore, God must also have a cause. But the cause of God is by definition God. Again, they are committing the same fallacy that they are accusing Christians of committing. But there is one other way to respond to the question, if God created the world, who created God? And that is to appeal to the atheist's own worldview. Atheists reject the existence of God because they believe that only matter is real. So let's ask them a simple question. If everything that exists is made of matter, then where did that matter come from? Atheists typically have no answer for this question. But this is a necessary question because if all that exists is matter, then something has to have caused that matter to come into existence. But atheists can't answer that question because it doesn't fit within their worldview. So the next time an atheist asks you if God created the world, who created God, remember, you're not dealing with an intellectually honest person. You're dealing with someone who is trying to use every tool at their disposal to try to get you to abandon your faith in God. Don't fall for it. Instead, ask them some hard questions of your own. This is your host. Thanks for watching this episode of the Apologetics Guys. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a thumbs up. Also, don't forget to subscribe. We'll let you know every time we release a new video.